Hello my dear friends, welcome to Live Prep. In the previous lecture, we studied about the carbon dioxide transport, and now we are entering into the last content that is related to this breathing and exchange of gases. So here we are mainly talking about the regulation of this breathing mechanism, and then we will go with some small information regarding some of the diseases, and then we will read the NCERT content for the summary. So with this lecture will be completed. The information is very simple. First let me explain the regulation, then we will read the NCERT content for that. So how exactly this regulation is taking place? Observe carefully. Within the brain there are some regions. So in that we are focusing on two important regions. One is called as pons varolii and the other one is called as medulla oblongata. One is pons varolii and the other one is called as medulla oblongata. But instead of writing pons varolii, you can simply write pons, and instead of writing medulla oblongata, you can simply write medulla. So these are the two important things. How exactly they have given the NCERT information? Let us observe carefully here. In the NCERT there they are saying that, so within this pons there is a region, okay. So this is called as pneumotaxic center. This name was mentioned in NCERT, and now I am writing another name but not mentioned in NCERT. There is another center that is called as apneustic center. So these are the two things that we are studying in the pons region. And within this medulla region, we are studying about, here there are some group of neurons and it is called as dorsal respiratory group. It is called as a DRG, dorsal respiratory group. Just ventral to this is the ventral side, right? So for the brain, if you are observing like this is dorsal side, this is ventral side, yes or no? So for this one ventral side, just ventral to this one, here is ventral respiratory group. So it is ventral respiratory group or G, respiratory group. So these are present. So now in the NCERT content, they have not given these two names. Instead of giving these two names, in the NCERT they have given that there is a respiratory rhythm center. Please observe carefully. In the NCERT, they did not use the words dorsal and ventral respiratory groups. Directly, they have given a name called as respiratory rhythm center. This is what they have given. And now, next one. Apart from this respiratory rhythm center, there is another center they have mentioned. And what is this particular center? This is called as chemosensitive area. So in this way, in the NCERT they give pneumotaxic center. In the NCERT they give respiratory rhythm center and then chemosensitive area. These are the three names they have mentioned in NCERT. Now what I will do is, I will tell you the functions of this and I will interlink with NCERT content. Okay, very simple things. First let us see. First we need to see the function of dorsal respiratory group. These are some group of neurons and they are controlling some breathing activities, and what they are actually doing. Dorsal respiratory group is involving in normal breathing control. In the normal condition, suppose I am in the resting condition. In the resting condition, this contraction relaxation of phrenic muscles of diaphragm and external intercostal muscles, right? So these things are controlled by dorsal respiratory group. Please understand this. Dorsal respiratory group is controlling the muscle contractions of diaphragm, that means phrenic muscles, and also external intercostal muscles. These are the ones that are involving in the normal breathing process. So normal breathing process is controlled by this dorsal respiratory group, correct? Nice. And then what this ventral respiratory group? This is having some group of neurons, and these neurons are useful to cause forced expiration and forced inspiration. Please understand this. For the normal breathing, dorsal respiratory group. During the forced inspiration, forced expiration, what happens here? extra muscles are coming. What are those? Abdominal muscles and internal intercostal will come. And those muscular contraction is under the control of ventral respiratory group. So under the forceful breathing process, forced breathing process are under control of ventral respiratory group, and the normal breathing is under the control of dorsal respiratory group. So in this way, overall whatever it is, so these two are coming under the respiratory rhythm center. So based on this, our respiration rhythm, so rate and all these are controlled here. Clear? This is what the function of respiratory rhythm center. So ultimately it is the respiratory rhythm center that is controlling our breathing activities. But the point here is, and this is in turn controlled by pneumotaxic center. And the pneumotaxic center present in the pons varoli is in turn controlling this, mainly the dorsal respiratory group. And how it exactly controlling, what this pneumotaxic center will do, please remember the major important point. Pneumotaxic center will give the signal to dorsal respiratory group, so that in the normal breathing process, see, now let us see the normal, if I am doing like this, it is inspiration or inhalation. Suppose I am doing like this, it is expiration or exhalation. Okay, see, in the normal inspiration, suppose I am doing the inspiration and I am stopping here, right? I am not going further. So who will say that stop there? Do you able to understand this? Someone should tell these muscles to stop further contraction. If these muscles are not stopping the further contraction, what happens? You are keep on doing this inspiration, and after some time your lungs will break. They will burst. Yes or no? They will burst. So please understand the significance of this pneumotaxic center. So what type of signal will be given by pneumotaxic center to dorsal respiratory group, or in simple to the respiratory rhythm center? It will give the information to switch off the inspiration. So how long you will do inspiration? Stop there. So that stop signal should be given. That stop information will be given by this pneumotaxic center. So since it is giving information to dorsal respiratory group, so they will do the contraction up to that, and then they will stop further inspiration. So once inspiration is stopped, what happens? Automatically expiration will occur. Understood or not? We need information for muscle contraction. So muscle contraction is helping in inspiration. So here information is coming for inspiration, muscle contraction, and muscles are keep on contracting. This is contracting like this. External intercostal muscles are contracting like this. So that volume is increased lateral ways, upside, and all the ways. Yes or no? So in this way, this pneumotaxic center is very important to cut off or switch off the inspiration. Please remember this one. So that's why this way it is giving the signal for stopping the inspiration. So in this way it is called as inspiration switch off signal. Inspiration switch off signal. So that inspiration will stop. So immediately it will go for expiration. In this way, this will decide this particular one. Understood or not? So now what happens? In this way, normally it is controlling this. Now what this pneumotaxic center will do? Again, it is involving in extreme conditions like forced inspiration, forced expiration. So in the forced inspiration, forced expiration, suppose you want to do forced inspiration. When you are doing the forced inspiration, now the duration should be increased. Now this is acting opposite to this one. So these two are acting opposite to each other. So in this way, in the normal conditions, this inspiration cutoff will be given by this pneumotaxic center. Understood or not? So in this way, this is very, very important. But anyhow, regarding the apneustic center, they have not mentioned in NCERT. So even though you are ignoring, no problem for NEET examination. Clear? This is what the general thing. So in this way, respiratory rhythm center is controlling the normal rhythm of the respiration breathing process. And here inspiration cutoff is decided by pneumotaxic center. And this will give information to respiratory rhythm center. So accordingly, respiration rhythm center will take the breathing and they up to that, and then it will stop it. Nice. This is into the normal condition. Normal inspiration expiration is taking place. Now let us take some other example. What is that example? Suppose I am doing the running. When I am doing the running, can I have the normal breathing rate? No. When I am doing the running, what happens? The cells are producing so much of CO2, and H plus ions and CO2 are more and more produced, and these are highly dangerous for the cells and they should be removed quickly. So in that case, please remember, so that is the reason why whenever we are doing some exercise or whenever we are doing this running, at that time our breathing rate will increase. Why the breathing rate is increasing? More expiration should occur so that CO2 and H plus should be removed very quickly, very quickly. Please remember the logic behind this. So there what happens, can you do that inspiration for the normal duration of 2 seconds? No. Their inspiration time is decreased. Yes or no? So you are not taking the full breath, right? In the case of when you are doing the running, will you do this? Will you do like this in the normal condition like this? No. There it will be like, yes or no? Quick, it is very fast. So now once again understand the significance of pneumotaxic center. Suppose you are in that particular situation, now breathing rate should be increased. If the breathing rate should be increased, inspiration time should be decreased. That means in a very less duration, inspiration should be off. This is very important. So please remember, so in this way, inspiration duration, how long you are doing the inspiration will be decided by pneumotaxic center. So it is very, very, very important. So please understand this. At least this is the basic information given in NCERT. So please remember up to this. This is about the normal regulation. Now let us see. There is another area that is present in the medulla portion, and this is called as chemosensitive area. What is the significance of this chemosensitive area? It is a part of a brain that is detecting information related to some chemicals. What are these? What are these? Now observe carefully here. Now I am drawing a rough diagram here. Suppose this is the heart. So in the heart what happens? Now this is the left side. This is the ventricle. From the left ventricle, aorta will come out. From the left ventricle, aorta will come out. Yes or no? Not only this. From this one, you will get some branches here. So these points, in short, I am saying, I am not drawing the original diagram, so observe carefully here. So this is to the right side, this is to the left side. So in this way, there are some arteries. They are called as carotid arteries. Carotid arteries. What are these? Right and left carotid arteries. Right carotid artery will carry blood to the right side of our head, and left one will carry to the left side of our head. And please remember, these carotid arteries are carrying oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood. And this is the aorta. This is also carrying oxygenated blood. So please observe carefully here. What actually we are measuring and where exactly we are measuring. These are the important points you need to observe for examination. So this is the aorta that is carrying oxygenated blood. And from this there are some branches like right and left carotid arteries. They are also carrying oxygenated blood. But they are carrying oxygenated blood to the brain. And anyhow, in this way, overall aorta is supplying oxygenated blood to entire body parts. And now here what we are saying, within this aorta, there are some regions. And within the carotid arteries, there are some regions. And within the aorta, whatever these regions are there, they are called as aortic bodies. And within the carotids, there are some bodies, they are called as carotid bodies. Please observe the content carefully. Within the aorta, aortic bodies. Within the carotid arteries, they are the carotid bodies. Understood or not? And now within these bodies, what are present? Some receptors are present. Within this, there are some receptors. Receptors are present in this. Even receptors are present even in this one also. So receptors for what? This is very important. Receptors for measuring the levels of carbon dioxide and also for measuring the H plus ion concentration. Please observe carefully. Receptors for CO2 and also H plus ion concentration. Please observe carefully. Actually, in our body, how much of oxygen is present? For that, do we have enough oxygen or not? For that, generally we are expecting the receptors for oxygen, right? To know how much of oxygen is present in our body, we need to have receptors for oxygen measurement. But now you need to understand the beauty of this. Here actually we are having the receptors for measuring CO2 and H plus ion concentration. And at the end of the paragraph, very clearly they said, the role of oxygen in the regulation of breathing is very less. Why they are saying like this? because in our body, even though oxygen levels are slightly variable, that is not actually affecting the breathing rate. So now you can understand this one. You may think that if oxygen levels are less, it is dangerous. It is dangerous, but not directly because of the measurement of oxygen. Indirectly, it is the measurement of H plus and CO2. I will tell you one by one. And now there is a treatment that is called as hypobaric treatment. So in the hypobaric treatment, what they will do is the doctors will give more oxygen to the patient. When more good oxygen is provided to the individual, what happens? Some of the problems will be resolved. Now you just understand that in that case what they are giving? They are giving more oxygen than the normal. When you are taking more oxygen than the normal, is there any problem technically? There is no problem. Even though more oxygen is present, there is no problem. So that is the reason why oxygen levels are not measured in our body, but CO2 and H plus levels are measured in our body. What is the logic here? Even though more oxygen is present, there is no problem. But if oxygen is lesser, now automatically what happens? Partial pressure of CO2 will rise. And also H plus ion production at the level of tissues also will increase. So lesser values of oxygen will indirectly raise the values of CO2 and H plus. So anyhow we are having the receptors for this. And what these receptors will do, they will measure the values of this particular CO2 and H plus ion concentration. Now, if the CO2 and H plus ion concentrations are more, means what? Indirectly in our body oxygen levels are less. These values are more means what? Oxygen levels are less. That's it. So when these levels are more, information from these will be given to chemosensitive area. So in this way, chemosensitive area will receive information from receptors that are present in aortic bodies and also carotid bodies. Understood or not? So in this way, the information regarding the levels of CO2 and H plus ion are obtained by the brain. Once this is feeling that oxygen levels are less, it will again give the information to respiratory rhythm center. Now once again breathing rate will increase. So in this way, please observe carefully, in our body we are having the receptors mainly for the measurement of CO2 and H plus ion concentrations, but not for oxygen, because the role of oxygen in the respiratory mechanism regulation is very less. So in this way, even the oxygen level is more, no problem. But if oxygen levels are decreasing, automatically these two levels will increase. So that will be sensed by chemosensitive area, and in turn it will give information to respiratory rhythm center. Now again breathing rate will increase. Whenever we need more oxygen, automatically breathing rate will be increased. If you want to remove, the same reason, oxygen decreased means what? CO2 is more. So because of this, what happens? There is a chance of taking more oxygen and there is a chance of releasing more CO2. That's why breathing rate is increased. So in this way, in the normal condition, 12 to 16 breaths per minute is the normal. But under the other conditions like this, now breathing rate may be increased. So please observe this particular content. So in this way, we are talking about the regulation of this breathing mechanism we are studying here. The same thing in very simple terms they have given in the NCERT. Same points I have given here. So this is the pneumotaxic center, apneustic center, dorsal respiratory group, ventral respiratory group. But in this diagram they have not mentioned chemosensitive area. This is the chemosensitive area. This is the dorsal respiratory group. This is the chemosensitive area. So in this way, what is the overall function here? Dorsal respiratory group is involving in normal breathing control. Ventral respiratory group is involving in forced breathing process. And pneumotaxic center is involving in giving signal to dorsal respiratory group, and also it is giving the inspiratory off switch. It is also providing the inspiratory off switch. So where the inspiration should off, that will give. Apneustic center is acting opposite to this pneumotaxic center. That's it. These are the four important points. Anyhow, that chemosensitive area will receive the information from various receptors that are present in the aorta and also in the carotid arteries, so that within the oxygenated blood, if more CO2 is present, means what? Oxygen levels are less. So in this way, within the oxygenated blood, it is measuring the CO2 and H plus ion concentrations mainly. So accordingly, it will give the information to the respiratory rhythm center once again. That's it. Now let us quickly go through the information. Human beings have a significant ability to maintain and moderate the respiratory rhythm to suit the demands of the body tissues. So according to the body tissue requirement, what is the requirement? Accordingly, it can change or alter or moderate or change the respiratory rhythm, or the breathing rate can be changed. That's what they are saying. This is done by the neural system. So ultimately, it is under the control of neural control. A specialized center present in the medulla region, medulla oblongata of the brain, and that is called as respiratory rhythm center, that is primarily responsible for this regulation. So normal regulation will be done by respiratory rhythm center. Another center present in the pons region, pons varolii region of the brain, and that is called as pneumotaxic center, that can moderate the functions of respiratory rhythm center. That means pneumotaxic center will give signal to respiratory rhythm center. In this way, it can also control the respiratory rhythm. Next one, neural signals from this center can reduce the duration of inspiration and thereby alter the respiratory rate. So information, that cutoff information is coming from the pneumotaxic center. So in this way, the neural signal from this center means what? From the pneumotaxic center can reduce the duration of inspiration. Since that is giving the inspiration cutoff location, inspiration cutoff timing, so accordingly inspiration will stop. So inspiration is stopping in a very less time means breathing rate will increase. So in this way it will alter or change the respiratory rate. So in this way they are giving the relation between these two. A chemosensitive area, a separate one, a chemosensitive area is present or situated adjacent to the respiratory rhythm center. So it is present nearer to the respiratory center, respiratory rhythm center, and which is highly sensitive to CO2 and hydrogen ions. Please remember, CO2, hydrogen only they mentioned. They are not mentioning about the oxygen. So please observe carefully. Next one. Increase in these substances can activate this substance. That means if CO2 levels increase, if H plus ion concentration increase, H plus ion concentration increase means pH value decreases. Please remember this. And this will activate this particular chemosensitive area, which in turn signal the rhythm center to make necessary adjustments in the respiratory process. So now it is giving information to respiratory rhythm center. So accordingly it will change the respiratory rate, by which these substances can be eliminated. So accordingly, because of this, CO2 and H plus will be removed. This is what they are saying. Receptors associated with aortic arch and carotid artery. Aortic arch, aorta is having some receptors within this, and carotid artery is having also some receptors, and they also recognize changes in the CO2 and H plus ion concentration. Actually, here at the level of this blood circulation, the levels are measured and information will be given to the chemosensitive area. So in this way, these receptors are helping in recognizing the concentration of this, and then ultimately, indirectly, they are helping in regulating the breathing rate and send the necessary signals to the rhythm center for remedial action. So indirectly, ultimately, they are giving information to respiratory rhythm center. So accordingly, the respiratory breath rate will be altered so that the problem will be solved. So in this way, remedial action. So to resolve the problem, so whatever the action should be taken, that action will be taken by respiratory rhythm center. The role of oxygen in the regulation of respiratory rhythm is quite insignificant. That means the role of oxygen in breathing rate control is very, very less. Understood or not? So in our body, we are having the receptors to measure the levels of CO2 and H plus ion. So the role of oxygen is very, very less. With that, the respiration regulatory mechanism is completed. And now we are going with few examples given in NCERT regarding the disorders of respiratory system. So here they have mentioned about the asthma. In the case of asthma, what happens? Let us observe very carefully. So this is the normal airway passage, whether they are bronchi or whatever it is. So this is the bronchi. So inside this, they are having this much of gap. So freely the air is going inside and then it is coming outside. Like this it is happening. Nice. But in the case of asthma, what happens? Now it is like inflammation to the bronchi mainly. So because of the inflammation, what actually happens is, so this constriction will occur. bronchial constriction will occur. Because of the constriction, what happens? The diameter of this particular passage is decreasing. Once the diameter of the passage is decreasing, the air that is entering into the lungs will be decreased. That is the reason why in the case of asthma or the bronchial asthma specifically, the individual is suffering from oxygen or in simple air lack of this particular oxygen or the decreased supply of the oxygen. This is what the major problem is. So that's why they are taking some chemicals either through in the form of tablet or in the form of spray or something. So ultimately they are helping in relaxing of these muscles. So once again the blockage will be, the blockage means the initially the diameter got decreased, right? Again it will become normal. So again they will get the enough supply of oxygen again. That means ventilation will be proper again. So in this way, please understand this is the normal. In the case of this particular asthma, what is happening? This airways will be blocked by decreasing the diameter. So this lumen diameter will be decreased. This is what the problem we are observing generally in the case of asthma. And asthma is the difficulty in the breathing. So when this particular one is decreased, what happens? They will face much difficulty while doing the breathing. That's what they're saying. Difficulty in the breathing, that is ultimately causing wheezing due to the inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. Bronchi and bronchioles are inflamed, swollen. Since they are swollen, the diameter of this particular lumen got decreased. This is what the problem is. Next one is regarding the emphysema. So this is a general term. Reasons may be many, so many reasons are there. So this emphysema is a chronic disorder in which alveolar walls are damaged. Now please understand this. Actual exchange of gas is happening at the alveolar walls. If these alveolar walls are damaged, now exchange of gases will be affected. Please understand the relation here. Emphysema is a chronic disorder in which alveolar walls are damaged, due to which means because of the damage of the alveolar walls, respiratory surface is decreased. Since the wall is damaged there, now it is not useful for exchange of gases. Now among the useful, now some portion is becoming not useful. So the respiratory surface, the exchange of process that is happening is at very less portion. So because of this, what happens? Enough amount of oxygen cannot go into the blood and enough amount of CO2 is not released from the body. So this is again creating the problems in the individual, yes or no? And one of the major causes of this particular emphysema is cigarette smoking. Cigarette smoking can cause the emphysema. Please understand this. And this is what the emphysema that was given under the breathing and exchange of chapter in the class 11th. But in the class 12th, under the biotechnology applications chapter, there they are giving about one particular product. There is a human protein that is called alpha-1 antitrypsin that is used to treat emphysema. Please remember this one. We are talking about emphysema here, and in the biotechnology applications, they are talking about some products, biological products we can get from some transgenic animals. So there they are saying that human protein that is alpha-1 antitrypsin, human alpha-1 antitrypsin is used to treat emphysema. This is from the NCERT. You need to compulsorily remember this. Clear? Anyhow, when we are studying that particular biotechnology applications chapter, once again we will study this. So please remember this particular one. Next one is regarding the occupational respiratory disorders. What is this occupational respiratory disorders? So different people, they are doing the different types of jobs. Okay. So some may be working in some mining industries. So mainly in the case of mining industries, what happened? That silica dust will be going. So since they are working there, so some amount of dust is going into the lungs. That is one thing. Some people who are working with the asbestos, so they are also taking this asbestos into the lungs. Some people, so they are, suppose some farmers, they are working in the farmland, so they are spraying some different types of chemicals. There may be some chemical pesticides or some things. So now what happens? Some of them are, they are entering into the lungs. And here what happens is, since they are continuously doing the same job, now after a long exposure, what happens? The lungs will be damaged. And this type of damages, disorders, so different names are there according to the different jobs and all. So now these are all generally called as occupational respiratory disorders in simple. Okay, let us see. In certain industries, especially those involving grinding or stone breaking, mainly some dust is coming out there. So much dust is produced that the defense mechanism of body cannot fully cope up with the situation. So since the dust is continuously going and since it is accumulated inside the lungs, Our immune system is not able to remove that particular one. So in the course of duration, what happens? That portion will be damaged and it will be non-functional. This is what they are saying here. Long exposure can give rise to inflammation that is ultimately leading to fibrosis. So here what happens, and this damaged portion of it will become the fibrosis. So what this fibrosis means? Some fibers will be start developing there. Some fibers will be proliferation of fibrous tissue. So fibrous tissue will be developing there. Please remember that fibrous tissue, whatever is forming there, that is not useful for exchange of gases. If it is not useful for exchange of gases, that part will be waste. Yes or no? This is how our respiratory capacity, means that exchange of gases capacity will be decreased. That's what they are saying. And thus causing serious lung damage. So in this way, serious damage to the lung will occur. Workers in such industry should wear protective mask. So they should compulsorily wear the mask so that this dust should not enter into their lungs. So in this way, they can, at least to some extent, they can protect themselves from these particular disorders. Clear? This is what the NCERT information regarding the disorders. Now we are going with the summary, and here we covered all the points, so I don't need to explain something new. So simply I am reading the sentence, observe carefully. Cells utilize oxygen for metabolism and produce energy along with substances like carbon dioxide, which is harmful. So our cells, body cells are utilizing the oxygen ultimately for the catabolism of some substances, and during this process they are releasing some compounds like CO2 which are harmful, so they should be removed from the body. Animals have evolved different mechanisms for the transport of oxygen to the cells and for the removal of carbon dioxide from there. So already in the beginning, first introductory lecture we studied, in different mechanisms, different types of mechanisms are there. Some are directly exchanging the gases at the level of body surface. Some are using moist cuticles, some are using the gills, some are using the lungs. Likewise we study, and in the case of insects we are studying the tracheal tubes. All these examples they are saying here. Next one. We have a well-developed respiratory, we means with respect to human they are talking. So we have well-developed respiratory system comprising two lungs and associated air passages to perform this function. So we are having the two lungs connected to the lungs, there is a trachea and there is a nasal passage. All these things are present in the human respiratory system. The first step in respiration is the breathing. So for 5 steps we study now. Out of the 5 steps, the first step is the breathing. What is this breathing? Inspiration and expiration is the breathing. Breathing by which atmospheric air is taken in. Atmospheric air is taken into the body. That means it is inspiration. And alveolar air is released out. That means it is the expiration. So in the breathing, we are studying both inspiration and expiration. Then what we are studying? Exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between deoxygenated blood and alveoli. This is the external respiration we are talking. Next one, transport of these gases throughout the body by the blood. Transport of oxygen we studied, transport of CO2 also we studied. Next one, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between oxygenated blood and the tissues. This is the internal respiration we are studying. Next one, utilization of oxygen by the cells and the resultant production of CO2. This is the cellular respiration we studied. These are the other steps that are involved. Yes or no? Next one, inspiration and expiration are carried out by creating pressure gradients between the atmosphere and alveoli. Yes or no? So when the pressure within the alveoli is less than atmosphere, inspiration will occur. When the pressure within the alveoli is more than atmosphere, expiration will occur. Already we studied this. And for this one, phrenic muscles of diaphragm and intercostal muscles present between the ribs, they are very important. Already we studied about this. That's what they are saying here. With the help of some specialized muscles like intercostal and diaphragm. These are the important muscles. Volumes of air involved in these activities can be estimated with the help of spirometer and are of clinical significance. With the help of spirometer, we can calculate these volumes and capacities, and they are having some clinical significance. Next one, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide at the alveoli and tissues occur by the diffusion. So anyhow, this exchange is always diffusion process only. It is a passive process. It does not require any energy. Next one, rate of diffusion is dependent on the partial pressure gradients. If the partial pressure gradient means the difference is too high, diffusion is faster. That's what 3 factors we study now. Difference in the partial pressure, that means partial pressure gradient. Second one, solubility of the gases. Third one, regarding the thickness of the diffusion membrane. Those points they are talking here is dependent on the partial pressure gradients of oxygen, and also partial pressure gradient of the carbon dioxide. They are very important. Next one, their solubility also important, as well as the thickness of the diffusion surface. These are the three important factors that are determining the exchange of gases. Next one, these factors in our body facilitate diffusion of oxygen from the alveoli to the deoxygenated blood, as well as from the oxygenated blood to the tissues. So based on these particular things, now the diffusion of gas is taking place. Next one, the factors are favorable for the diffusion of CO2 in the opposite direction, that is from the tissue to the deoxygenated blood, and again from deoxygenated blood to the alveoli. So in this way we are talking about this. Okay, in this way ultimately from tissue to the alveoli. Next one, oxygen is transported mainly as oxyhemoglobin. Oxygen is combining with hemoglobin and then it is forming the oxyhemoglobin. Next one, in the alveoli where partial pressure of oxygen is higher, so in the alveoli partial pressure of oxygen is higher, oxygen gets bound to hemoglobin in the blood, and which is easily dissociated at the tissues. At the tissues again, this oxygen and hemoglobin can be dissociated, where because at the tissues oxygen is low and the partial pressure of CO2 is high, and also H plus ion concentration is high. This is the reasons. Next one, nearly 70% of CO2 is transported as bicarbonate with the help of the enzyme that is called carbonic anhydrase. Next one, 20 to 25% of CO2 is carried by hemoglobin as carbaminohemoglobin. Already we studied. In the tissues where CO2 is high, there it means what? Hemoglobin gets bound with this CO2. It means CO2 gets bound to blood. Gets bound to blood means what? Hemoglobin. Whereas in the alveoli where partial pressure of CO2 is low and oxygen is high, it gets removed from the blood. So CO2 is removed from the hemoglobin and going into the alveoli. This is what they are saying. Next one, respiratory rhythm is maintained by the respiratory center in the medulla region of the brain. This is the major one that is controlling the respiratory rhythm. A pneumotaxic center in the pons region of the brain and chemosensitive area in the medulla, they are also helping in altering the respiratory mechanism. With this, the summary of this particular chapter is also completed. Now, within the exercise, there is one MCQ that let us go through that one. What will be the partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of CO2 in the atmosphere, in the atmospheric air, compared to those in the alveolar air? Now tell me. Already we studied about these partial pressures. In the atmospheric air, oxygen partial pressure is 159 mm mercury and the CO2 is 0.3 mm mercury. In the alveoli, the oxygen is 104 mm mercury and CO2 is 40 mm mercury. Now here we need to fix alveolar. When compared with alveolar in the atmosphere, oxygen is more, CO2 is less. So partial pressure of oxygen is higher and partial pressure of CO2 is lesser. So answer will be option 2. Answer will be option 2. So this is the one MCQ that was given in the exercise. So please go through this one. And with this, this complete chapter is done. And now, even the chapter is completed, now I am taking one more lecture, separate lecture. So in that lecture, we will study about some important extra informations. Even though that lecture is optional, my suggestion is at least go through that lecture once. Definitely you will get some important points. Okay, so whatever see till now we have completed the entire NCERT content nicely, and in the next one, so though they were not mentioned in the NCERT directly, some of these are indirectly related, and some questions you will get some answers for the questions given in the exercise of this particular chapter. In the exercise they have given some questions, right? So for some of them you will get the answers in that particular lecture. So at least go through once. It will not take much time. So please go through that one. Okay. So with this lecture is completed. So we'll meet in the next lecture. Thank you.